So I think that's changing, and this is also more relevant today rather than just knowing stuff by heart, really thinking about problems and how to solve them. So this is something that's changed even without the use of AI. And AI is, of course, a big topic when it comes to education. So I think the classical semester project is not really worth it anymore. So if you have a theoretical project and you want to write about it and you give the right prompts to an AI, you get quite a nice project. In our area of expertise, you still have the lab work. As of yet, this can't be redone by the AI, but writing an introduction, for example, it's perfect for an AI. It's not a problem.
What does it take to walk away from a senior industry role at Bayer, running upstream development, and choose the classroom instead? Today's guest, Steffen Kreye, did exactly that. With a career spanning glycotope cell line development labs to leading upstream at one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, he has now become a professor for industrial biotechnology. He trains the next generation of bioprocess engineers at Berliner Hochschule for Technik in Berlin, Germany. In part 1, we explore his journey, what drove the pivot, and the structural challenges facing applied science education today. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Steffen. It's great to have you on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure, and it's great to reconnect. To get us started, Steffen, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
That's a tough one from the start, but I think in one of my lectures, I always put the process is the product. Very famous quote, I guess, in bioprocessing. And it's kind of true, but your process can be super, super nice, super sophisticated. But if the product itself, speaking of biopharmaceuticals, isn't working in the clinic, then the process is more or less worthless. So I think, of course, the process is important. And we as process engineers, we really think that it defines the product, and it does. But as I said, it's an important phrase. But I think if the product is not working in the clinic or in human trials, then the process can be as nice, as continuous, as AI, as whatever. You don't have a use case for the process. That's something I would not, let's say, 100% agree with.
Good piece of advice is always start with the end in mind. And this is what comes to my mind when you're sharing this. Steffen, you have an exciting career path. Draw us into your story. Tell us what sparked your passion for biotech and what were some interesting pit stops along your way?
Where do I start? So I guess in school, I wasn't usually the best student, I would say. But in senior high school, my interest in mathematics, chemistry, and biology really sparked. And for some reason, I got good at it. I don't really know why. Something clicked in my mind. And then I wanted to study this area. And I think biotech is the perfect example of combining mathematics, technical aspects, chemistry, and biology. So this was a good fit. My brother also thought about studying biotechnology. He ended up studying chemistry, which he also really enjoyed. And so I applied for a biotechnology program. And I see the same with my students now. It's very interesting when people start studying biotechnology. I would say most of them don't really know what biotechnology is really about. I still remember my physics lecture. Physics was my worst module in my whole study course. But there was a PhD student who gave some advice and some lecturing. And he was like, well, you guys are biotechnologists and you will be standing in front of a big tank and you will be culturing cells. And I was sitting there in the first semester. I was like, that's not really what I want to do. I want to work with biochemistry and cells and genetics and stuff like that. And now looking back on my industrial career, I was always standing in front of a big vessel and I was cultivating cells. So it came full circle. So when I studied biotechnology, I really thought the whole package is really interesting. I got interested about biochemistry. The technical aspects really came later on, and I focused on bioprocess engineering. Some of my study colleagues, they focus more on cell biology, microbiology, but I always find the technical aspect really interesting. And I think my study abroad during my master's in Canada was really interesting and was also the first time I had the pleasure to work with show cells. So I think this was an important step. I didn't realize it at that time, but this basically the groundwork for my PhD, which I did externally in a company called Glycotope, which is not around anymore, but affiliated company, Fioni Bio, is still around. And I think the master thesis and then the aspect of bioprocess engineering with mammalian cells, production of biopharmaceuticals, this is really where I got good at. And then, of course, the PhD's thesis is also a journey in most cases. I realized during this journey, the idea of my PhD thesis was initially to connect the cell line development, molecular biology with the process, but I ended up doing mostly process science and process engineering, but I really enjoyed this working with a big bioreactor instead of pipetting small amounts of liquid from one tube to another. So this is really where I got into bioprocess engineering, working with bioreactors and also work with biopharma proteins. I think this was also a very important step in my career. And then it more or less went along. So I finished my PhD and then I was lucky to stay within the company where I did my PhD. I worked there as a scientist, later on as a group leader for the upstream development team. So this was also very exciting, first time to have human resources. And yeah, that was a nice development, I think. But coming from this rather smaller company, I always had in mind, how do big companies do what I'm doing right now? One time I was looking at job offerings and there was a posting from Bayer. They were looking for a process expert in upstream development. I more or less checked all the boxes and then I applied. I got an invitation, had a nice interview, and then I started at Bayer working as an upstream process expert, which sounds nice and fancy. And later on I got promoted to lab head. So again, I had a small team and then I worked with project pipeline of Bayer, developing cell culture processes and also scaling them up, transfer them to the clinical manufacturing sites. This was an interesting journey. When I tell this to my students, usually one of them raises their hands and they say, why are you here now? What makes you change to come to university or to academia? And this is, again, a good question.
That's an excellent question, yes.
Yes. It wasn't always like this dream of mine. So a friend of mine who is also a professor now, who I studied with, he also had this dream that he would become a professor. I never really had this dream. It was kind of strange. I was enjoying my time at Bayer. I had great colleagues. The stuff that I was doing was awesome. I was doing the stuff that I always enjoyed, working with bioreactors and so on. But I realized big corporation is not really my deal. Things kind of move slowly, a lot of bureaucracy. So this is not really something I want to do until my pensions. On one Sunday afternoon, I was sitting on the couch. For some reason, I was Googling Professor of Biotechnology. And in Germany, here we have two different kinds of universities. We have the, I would say, normal universities and then University of Applied Sciences, which are more comparable to, I would say, university colleges. You still get a master and a bachelor degree, more or less head-to-head comparable to a university degree. But education is more focused on the application and on industry application of the program. And I knew, because I was in the industry for how long, 7 or 8 years, that a classical academic pathway is more or less impossible to very, very difficult. I didn't have a lot of publications. I had a few patents from my time in the industry, but I didn't have the track record of 5 or 6 papers a year. So like a classical academical career at a university was difficult. But with my profile, I thought this was a really good match for the university college. So I was looking explicitly for this kind of job. And then I Googled it on one Sunday afternoon on the couch. And the first hit on Google is the job that I'm having right now. So it was something aligned there in the universe that this job offering was there at the exact moment where I was feeling like Googling it. And I more or less checked all the boxes again. So they were looking for someone who had bioprocess experience, working with cell culture, design of experiment. It appeared like a perfect fit. And then I applied. and the application process for a professorship can be quite long and tedious. Also, during this time period, Corona happened, so COVID-19, and this also made the application process longer than I expected. But I guess from sending out the application to have it on paper that I will become a professor was around a year, which is more or less normal, even without COVID. So it's a long, very formal application process. And since 5 years now, I'm a professor for industrial biotechnology here in Berlin at the Berliner Hochschule für Technik, the University of Applied Sciences. And my focus is industrial biotechnology. It's a very broad field, but my focus area is, I think it's called applied cell culture. So it really fits well to my profile.
Yeah, that's exciting. It seems also like a natural evolution of what you've done before. And then it looks like that you got interested in teaching part, but now you can leverage a lot of your expertise and knowledge that you acquired both in a smaller company and in big pharma. For those who are not very familiar with, shall I say, dual education system that's very prominent in Germany, also in Switzerland. In other parts of the world, perhaps people are not so familiar with that. So the mission of University of Applied Sciences is to prepare the students directly for the industry. So can you tell us a bit what that means? So how is, for instance, the teaching or the curriculum different from a traditional university?
Right. I think we have a much stronger focus on actual lab work. So when I talk to people who hire our students for bachelor thesis or master thesis, or even later on for jobs, they really say you can take our students and put them in a lab and they start working. A university student, they might go back to their office and read papers for 2 weeks and then do their first experiments, which is also a good way to approach things. But our students have really those hands-on experience and this hands-on mentality. So they go into the lab and they want to work with their hands. They want to do stuff in the lab and they really enjoy the lab work. And this is also seen in the curriculum. So we have strong focus on lab courses. I did my bachelor and master's in a university. Of course, I also had practical training, but not as much as here right now. So for example, in the 5th and 4th semester here in our bachelor's program, the students only have one module, which is a lecture. And apart from that, they have lab courses after lab courses after lab courses, cell biology, microbiology, genetics, and they also have the option of choosing different elective courses depending on where they want to specialize. So they really get this hands-on experience, which is, I think, very good to know because they still get the scientific background, but they really know how to get along in the laboratory. I think this is the key part. But this also brings quite a long list of issues because running a lab and teaching in a lab is very expensive. So if you do computer sciences or philosophical sciences, you more or less need a computer and maybe a library or something. That's it. But if you do lab courses and also in a broad field like biotechnology, you would need bioreactors, you need laminar flows for cell culture, microbiology and biochemistry, mass specs and so on. This is all very expensive. And this is something that's difficult at the moment because the universities in general, I believe they're looking more money focused on their education. But we, of course, want to keep our lab focus because this is what's differentiating us from the universities. And if we are getting told now lab courses are too expensive, do more lectures, then we are getting more closer to universities and we lose our unique selling point. So this is really difficult at the moment. I think that's something a lot of universities of applied sciences are struggling with because lab work is just expensive, especially in my field because I come from the biopharma industry. And if I tell them here on the slide, there's a bioreactor, a system from a nice company, you use this for process development and this costs $500,000, which is, I guess, not that much money for a biopharmaceutical company, but for a university, that's a lot of money. You are happy to get maybe this kind of investment once in your career. And then, of course, you have the following costs of cell culture, media, of consumables, and so on. So this is really, really a challenge.
How do you partner with companies? Perhaps there's some investors or some other ways to overcome these challenges to stay relevant. And I agree with you that the lab work, the practical work is extremely important because you don't learn how to operate a bioreactor just by looking at the slide. So it's absolutely key. What are some strategies you are undertaking now to still be relevant and to still be able to offer these expensive lab courses?
One aspect, which is not strategy, but just more or less coincidence, we right now are in a brand new building, and we're lucky to had some investment combined with this new building. So we were able to get new bioreactors, which are very nice. We were able to get more equipment. So at the moment, we are quite happy with our equipment so far. But of course, the following costs are interesting and important. So we have to see how we do that. And you mentioned one solution is to partner up with industry partners. And this is, of course, something that we do. So I have a good network of the area here in Berlin. Berlin is not that known for the big players, maybe except for Bayer, which is there, but there are a lot of smaller and mid-sized companies, and most of them I have good relations. There are some companies who do basically what I was doing beforehand, so process development, upstream process development, downstream process development. Some of our students actually ended up in those companies and they have a good time. And whenever there's cell culture media that is close to their expiry date or even expired, I get a call that there's some cell culture media over. We can't use it for our projects, but for teaching, that's still fine. If the cells grow 10, 20%, even 30% less than their maximum growth rate or their maximum viable cell density, that's still okay. And then I get those as a gift from the companies. Same with other consumables, protein A resins, for example, if they are recycled for 10s, 20th times, then we can get them and do stuff here. Same with old equipment. They call us, and if you have the network, you can really leverage this to save money and also to stay relevant, get the materials that are used also in the industry. It's also good advertisement for the companies, so that the students, they see the cell culture media flask and they read the company, so they also get some kind of branding. This works really nice. And the other aspect is that due to our nature as a University of Applied Sciences, me and my colleagues, we don't have strong research on our own. So at university, you have the professor, which has a couple of postdocs, a couple of PhD students, then master students, bachelor students. And here, only a few of my colleagues have this kind of structure. Most of us, we are really focusing on the teaching and the training of the students. This also means that bachelor thesis and master thesis are usually done outside of university. So the students, they go to the companies here in Berlin and the surrounding Brandenburg, sometimes also abroad or across Germany. And this is also very interesting for me because I have to evaluate their bachelor thesis, which were not done in my lab. So people go to Bayer or to other companies here around Berlin and to the Charité. I guess most of our students go to the Charité, which is one of the biggest university hospitals in Germany, if not Europe. And they do cutting-edge research. And then you reach a bachelor thesis, you read the master's thesis. And this is also a way for me to stay up to date about recent developments.
Speaking of staying up to date, there is no doubt about that. We're in a very fast season of change in the industry. There's so many new technologies coming. I mean, modeling, digital technologies, AI, and lots more robotics. How do you stay relevant in your teaching and also in the challenges you've just mentioned in the infrastructure? How does that work?
Similar to what I've mentioned before, one way to stay relevant and up to date is with the master and bachelor thesis that I read. Very exciting. It's also always educating for me to read something new. Apart from that, of course, visiting conferences is nice, which is also usually connected with fees, which is, of course, normal. But coming from academia, you usually get a discount. So conferences are always nice for me to see what's going on, which topics are relevant. What else? I think this is really important. I don't have the perfect answer right now, but I just realized this semester, so I've been teaching for 5 years, and most of the slides have been prepared 5 years ago. And when I talk about biopharmaceutical development and how many biosimilars are out there, what's the capabilities of CMOs, which CMOs are most relevant, what's the capacity for cell culture worldwide, I collected all these numbers 5 years ago, and I have them on the slides, and sometimes I see projections from like the numbers are from 2021 and the projections are for 2022, 23, 24. And just realized 5 years ago, those were projections, but now the world moved on. And even those things that I mentioned are not really fast evolving topics. So the capacity and CMO capacity is growing, not that rapidly like other developments like AI and so on. So I never really wanted to be one of those professors where you have a lecture and you can see on the bottom of the slide summer semester of 1988 or something. So I really never want to do that. So after 5 years, I really realized I have to go over my slides again and work on the numbers to get more recent publications in there. So I think this is an ongoing process. I would love to have more time to do this. As a lecturer in the University of Applied Sciences, you have to do twice as much teaching as at a university. And this is basically taking up most of my time. In the morning, I'm giving lectures. In the afternoon, I will be in the lab with the students, which is also very unique for our university. I think when I was studying at university, within the 5 years, I've been in the lab maybe once with the professor. In most cases, the lab courses were taught by PhD students, which had to do it. They weren't really excited about it. And here, we want to do it. So our engagement, our excitement is much more prominent. So this is taking up most of my time. And what's really fun is actually taking the slides from 5 years ago and see what changed. How do I have to stay up to date and then get more relevant numbers in the slides, maybe include some more topics like cell and gene therapy. This is what I always preaching my students. If I would study biotechnology, I would probably go into this area because it's just super exciting with all the risks, but also the outcome and the benefits. This is something I would focus on. And also, I'm a process engineer, especially the processes for cell and gene are developing as we speak. So this is something I don't have that much experience. My experience is classical protein business, antibodies and so on. But I guess this is super exciting. I would love to work in a field like that if I were a student right now.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. I mean, there's so much going on. And as you mentioned in the cell and gene, for instance, I'm wondering, Steffen, how has the teaching style or the teaching strategy evolved, especially with AI or the research itself? We get access. I mean, what usually took weeks to get all the publications, you can now put into an AI prompt and it takes a few minutes and you have a huge list of recent publications. So that changes the game quite a lot. What is your perspective? What have you already implemented or what is coming in order to provide the best possible teaching style and content to the students and to prepare them for today's industry?
That's an excellent question. I think maybe take it in 2 steps. So what I realized when I went to university, like some professors that come in the lecture room, they show their slides and then the time's up, they go out and that's it. For us here at the University of Applied Sciences, we've tried to engage with the students. So it's not like I'm standing in front there and speaking for 90 minutes. So it's more like a dialogue you have with the students, more like a seminar. You have some polls, you use some small gimmicks with the students, or you give them a challenge and let them work the challenge for 5 to 10 minutes in small groups and then reconvene. So I think that's changing and this is also more relevant today rather than just knowing stuff by heart, really thinking about problems and how to solve them. So this is something that's changed even without the use of AI. And AI is, of course, a big topic when it comes to education. So I think the classical semester project is not really worth it anymore. So if you have a theoretical project and you want to write about it and you give the right prompts to an AI, you get quite a nice project. In our area of expertise, you still have the lab work. As of yet, this can't be redone by the AI. And I think also creating the graphs and doing the discussion and so on is difficult for an AI. But writing an introduction, for example, it's perfect for an AI. It's not a problem. So sometimes when I request lab protocols, I sometimes tell the students, you don't have to write a protocol because this takes 1 minute for an AI to do it. They should really focus on structuring their data, interpreting their data. And then, of course, the publication. You mentioned the publication. I think this is a big benefit. I still remember my PhD thesis or bachelor master thesis. You were just searching the literature and looking for the right papers and so on. I think this is a really big topic for AI. And I also want the students to use AI because it's a tool, it's there, it's not going away, and they have to use it correctly. So if they just write an introduction and the introduction is wrong or not precise enough, or they use the wrong prompts, and then they get a bad grade. They can't say, well, that was the AI. This is your work. And of course, when they use AI, they have to cite the AI. So we have a document which states how to write a scientific report. And then they have to include a paragraph where they say which tools they used and how they used it. That's our approach. And I think from the grading perspective, in my grading scheme, I still have stuff like how they express themselves and also grammar and so on. I think this is becoming irrelevant now because you can just paste your whole thesis into AI and say, correct all the mistakes, make it sound scientific, and then you get a formally perfect, not content-wise, but formal perfect thesis. So this is something which is getting less and less important. But I guess now the focus is more shifting on, did they really understand what they were doing and what the results really mean? So I think we still here have a defense, even for a bachelor and a master thesis. I think in my university, I didn't really have to defend my thesis. I just handed in my thesis. And I think this is becoming more relevant. So the grading shift should be more to like the oral examination. They hand in their thesis, and then you can really check, did the AI write the thesis or did they really understand what they were doing?
That tension between industry pace and academic cycles is something every educator in the biotechnology is navigating right now. And there are no easy answers. In part 2, we go deeper with Steffen Kreye. We'll look into AI and machine learning in bioprocessing, which human skills are becoming more valuable, and what a well-trained bioprocess engineer will need to look like in 2035. If this episode resonated, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred platform. It means a great deal to me. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.